Ruslan.
So you talked about on your video reacting to Jordan Peterson, specifically cohabitating and living together before marriage. This is one of those myths, and I know there's probably people that are going to be watching this, Christians that are going to be watching this, that are currently cohabitating. It's become more and more normalized. Cohabitating just means living together before marriage, playing house. And you took a pretty strong stance on that, and I think the research backs that up. So it's like once you meet someone and things start going well, you still got to have some boundaries and still got to build out the rest of your life, and that requires restraint. So talk about that Jordan Peterson clip, which I've talked about on the channel before, but I think sometimes people aren't aware of what the statistics actually say about cohabitation.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I got a lot of pushback from that video too.
Oh, I'm sure you did.
Oh yeah, because here's the thing. When someone feels triggered, like, think about it. If someone's feeling triggered, that's something that they haven't resolved in their spirit, right? So you're bringing up something that they might be struggling with, or they've pushed down and they think, oh, like, I do this, so you're judging me for something that I do, right? And so that was a lot of the response that I got. They're like, oh, you need to test drive the car before you buy it. I'm like, well, if you're test driving the car, you might test drive this car and then say, oh, I want to return it in 3 months and get another car. And that's essentially what Jordan Peterson is saying. He's saying, listen, if you are cohabitating together, it means that someone's not telling you the truth, right? It means that he's basically saying what marriage does is expose who you are, because when you get into marriage, right? Marriage is the biggest indicator. It reveals everything, whether you hid it or not, right? It will eventually come out from the deepest, darkest trenches, right? And so he's essentially saying you need someone to tell you the truth. And that's what marriage is. But if you're doing this cohabitation, if you're doing playing house, what are you essentially doing? You'd be like, well, you're great for a couple months, right? Yeah. You're great for a couple months. You're great for maybe a couple years.
But I still want that out. I still want that option of getting out.
But I can still get out, right? There's nothing locking me to this actual commitment. And women see moving in together as the next step into commitment. And men, most of the time, think that moving in together is like, okay, I can test drive what marriage looks like with this person. And what it does too is it makes these roles that were intended for marriage, right? It makes these expectations that were originally meant for marriage, and now it's all convoluted. So like, am I supposed to cook and clean for him? Am I supposed to do his laundry? Right. Am I supposed to be the provider? Are we doing 50-50? Like, what are we doing? You know?
Yeah.
And I think that it really makes marriage like sliding into marriage, right? Like, oh, we just slid into marriage. Like, we spent 7 years together. We might as well just lock it up at this point. Why couldn't you make those 7 years marriage? Like, why couldn't you take that 7 years that you spent together and make it into marriage? Like, you're doing all of this extra stuff ahead of time. You had children out of wedlock or whatever. You had children out of a covenant marriage. Now the children don't know. You know, it confuses everyone. And yes, people push back. Well, how do you know how you're going to be with that person? You don't know. You don't know. That's the whole discovery of marriage. Those trials, that's that refinement that you need to go through in marriage. And you're trying to do this ahead of time.
Amen. And I think the studies show that people who live together before marriage are less likely to get married. And then if they do get married, they're more likely to get divorced, which is a fact. So
Yeah.
If you're cohabitating, just know that the longer you cohabitate, the less likely you are to get married and the more likely you are to get divorced after marriage, which is, you would think that, worldly wisdom would say the opposite. It's like, no, you test drive, da, da, da. It's like, it actually doesn't work that way. It's actually the opposite. And I think people don't know that and don't understand just the basic math of that.
And to that point too, I think it affects women more negatively or more intensely because, listen, we have a biological clock whether women want to admit it or not, right? Our clock is ticking. I'm so sorry to be the one to be the bearer of bad news. Biologically speaking, we cannot produce eggs for the eternity of our lives the same way that men can produce sperm for the eternity of their life. So a man leaving a 7-year relationship, a 7-year cohabitation is fine because he can go out and find another partner, maybe a younger partner, and do it all over again.
Right.
This is why you have these bachelors like George Clooney and like all these guys that like waited until their 60s, their 50s, 60s to finally like lock it down. But women suffer the most and will suffer in the long term because now I just spent 7 years with this person. Maybe I had a child with them. How am I going to now take that into my next relationship?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it just creates so much more unnecessary turmoil that could have all been mitigated if you just said, hey, like, and this is something I like about Kevin Samuels. He says 6 months to a year for dating, 6 months to a year for engagement, marriage. That should be the trajectory. And I agree with that statement because I think that people want to draw out these timelines, right? Well, I got to get to know them more. We have to get through these things.
Right.
And that's what marriage is for.
Amen. No, that's good. That's good.
Kingstream Entertainment. Ruslan.
When the culture says do what you love, we respond with love what you do. You may have responsibilities that you aren't passionate about, but loving what you do means being faithful to what's in front of you, committing to excellence as if that were your greatest dream. Colossians 3:23 says, work diligently at whatever you do as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. Love what you do. Love what you do.
Kingstream.
Yo, thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. If you found it valuable, considering giving it a like and subscribing. This month, I'm releasing the Love What You Do collection. And to celebrate, I'm doing a 3-day virtual event to help us go from learning to love what we do to ultimately doing what we love. By the way, it's free, so hit the link in the description to grab your seat today.